Anastasia Lutsishyna was a little girl of just 8 years old who lived in Ushuaia, a city with just over 170,000 inhabitants, located in Primorsky Krai in Russia. She lived just 100 meters from the school she attended, and her grandmother accompanied her all the way there and back. However, on February 19, 2013, classes ended earlier than normal, and as a result, Anastasia left 10 minutes early. As her house was a few meters from the school, she was supposed to get home in 3 minutes at most, but she never arrived. As soon as Anastasia's grandmother went to school to pick her up, she learned that the students had been dismissed early that day. The girl's grandmother was surprised because by then, Anastasia should have already arrived home. The grandmother then returned and told the girl's parents about what had happened, and they, very worried, decided to call the authorities. After collecting all the necessary information, the police began searching for the girl. In the following days, these searches intensified with the help of police, first responders, and several volunteers that included parents of other students at the school where Anastasia studied. According to sources, more than 800 people actively participated in the searches. The entire railway settlement area, attics and basements of several houses, abandoned land and houses, street drains, the city cemetery, and even open fields and parks were searched. The news about Anastasia's disappearance spread quickly through social media, and the entire city was on alert. A reward of 650,000 rubles was even offered for any relevant information that would lead to the girl's whereabouts. Anastasia's disappearance left many residents of the city of Ushuaia afraid, especially the parents of students from the same school as here, who began not to let their children walk the city streets alone. Later, a rumor emerged that a supposed maniac was acting in the city. This is because in the last 30 days, other cases of disappearances similar to Anastasia's were being reported. In these cases, the victims were found dead days later in some remote location in the city. However, the police stated that these were isolated cases and that they had no connection between them. But even so, the population did not calm down. In just 2 days, the entire city of Ushuaia had already been inspected in the search for Anastasia. From then on, it became clear that there was a need to expand the searches to neighboring cities. It was then that authorities, together with family members and volunteers, searched the cities of Mikhailovka, Borisovka, and Kamenushka. At that point, the case had already passed to federal jurisdiction, and even after several places had been inspected at least 3 times and the police had spoken to several local residents, no clues were found and no one had seen anything. The media also did its part by reporting the case frequently, showing a photo of Anastasia and asking for information, but even so they never got anything relevant about the girl. On February 23, 4 days after the disappearance, a resident was walking along a road with his dog when he noticed something strange a few meters from the road. As he got closer, he saw that it was a small human body that was almost completely covered in snow. The man informed the authorities, who quickly arrived at the location, which was in the town of Banevuovo, approximately 15 km from where Anastasia disappeared. As the girl's disappearance had already had repercussions throughout the region, the police deduced that it could be her body, something that was later confirmed. During the autopsy, the coroner found that Anastasia had been severely beaten and then received several blows to the chest and face with a sharp object with a blade. She also had bruises and abrasions on her face and marks on her neck that were consistent with attempted suffocation. According to the coroner, there were no signs of forced relations on the girl's body. When the media reported about the discovery of Anastasia's body and the brutality of the crime, the people of Ushuaia were outraged, and several demonstrations were held calling for justice. The crime was talked about almost everywhere, and soon a huge sensationalism was created around it. As I said previously, other crimes of a similar nature to Anastasia's were occurring in that region, but Anastasia's was the one that had the greatest impact, as she was caught practically on her doorstep. Specialist investigators from Moscow were sent to join the Ushuaia investigation team in order to help locate and arrest the person responsible for the crime. In addition, other agents from other cities in the region also joined the investigations. In a statement, the governor of Primorsky Krai, Vladimir Miklushevsky, promised that he would spare no effort and resources to find the criminal. Initially, the investigation was very complicated. There were no witnesses, There was no evidence, and until that moment, there was no footage. The school where Anastasia studied did not have any internal or external circuit surveillance cameras, and the surrounding buildings did not have any either. The place where the body was found was very remote. There were no houses or buildings, and there were no monitoring cameras nearby. But despite these difficulties in the investigation, the police had an idea. Cars in Russia, for the most part, have security cameras that record the entire journey. As a result, the police issued a request for all cars that passed in front of the school on the day and approximate time that Anastasia disappeared to provide the images to the authorities, as one of them could have recorded something suspicious. Several residents responded to the police's request, and through the recordings provided to them, they were able to verify that there was a single black taxi car that remained parked for a long time in the same place. In one of the videos, it was possible to see the exact moment when the driver of this taxi calls Anastasia and she gets into the car. The images were released by authorities who also offered a cash reward for any information that would lead them to the driver of that taxi. Soon, the man was identified. He was Anatoly Trepko. But who was Anatoly Trepko, and what were his motives for committing such a terrible crime? Anatoly Trepko was a 28-year-old married man who was born in Crimea. According to friends and family, he was a modest, quiet person and an exemplary family man. He had recently married his girlfriend Svetlana, and on the day he was located and arrested, his pregnant wife gave birth to a girl in the Ushorysk maternity hospital. When asked about her husband, Svetlana refused to believe that the loving man she had married was responsible for such a brutal crime. Already at the police station, Anatoly confessed to the crime and told everything that had happened. According to him, in an inexplicable way, he began to feel like committing a crime against a minor. He then stopped near the first school he found, and by coincidence Anastasia's classes had ended a little earlier that day, and she decided not to wait for her grandmother and walked home alone. When the girl was heading towards the street of her house, Anatoly approached her telling a story that he had a sick kitten that needed help and convinced her to go with him to help the animal. Anastasia got into the taxi and Anatoly took her out of the city, all the way so the girl wouldn't get excited. He made promises that he would show the kitten. When he arrived in a field far from the city, the man tried to force himself on the girl, but she resisted, and this made him angry. Because he was unable to do what he wanted with her, Anatoly dragged the girl to another location and stabbed her several times with a knife. Then the man left, leaving the body behind, which would be found days later. When asked by the police where the murder weapon was, Anatoly reported that it was in his house behind the toilet, which was true. An examination later confirmed that the blood found on the knife was indeed Anastasia Lutsishyna's. At the end of 2013, Anatoly had his first hearing and was asked to undergo a psychiatric examination to find out whether he had any mental disorder. This examination proved that Anatoly did not have any disorder and could be judged as a normal person. On February 17, 2014, the Primorsky Regional Court found Anatoly Trepko guilty of the crime against Anastasia Lutsishyna. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison and also ordered to pay compensation to the victim's family in the amount of 2 million rubles, about $22,000. To pay off this debt, some assets that were in his name were seized by the authorities. Anatoly never once apologized to Anastasia's family, much less showed any sign of regret for what he did. In a statement, the criminal only said that he was sad to have missed the birth of his daughter. After Anastasia's case, the school where she studied raised money to install a security camera system inside and outside the school. Other schools in various parts of Russia did the same, with the aim of bringing more safety to children within the school environment. Anastasia Lutsishyna was buried on the first day of spring 2013. Many residents of Ushorysk helped the girl's family in raising money for funeral expenses. Thousands of people from across the country attended the farewell ceremony, many bringing flowers and toys to honor her. The funeral procession followed the route she should have taken from school to her home, and then went to the cemetery where she was buried. Well folks, that is it for today. Thank you very much for watching till the end. Best wishes, and I see you next time.